Greetings and welcome, Marvel Future Fight fans. I am Blaze, and I'm a star creator. In this video, I'm going to gear this towards brand new players, or just players who are not familiar with the many terms and acronyms that many people in the Marvel Future Fight community use. So this kind of just summarizes what they mean, and when you hear them being talked about, you know what people are talking about as well. So the first term that gets mentioned a lot is meta. Meta basically is referring to any character that's the best under a certain circumstance. So there's different types of game modes, and if someone is really good at a game mode, they'll say they're the meta for that game mode. But what does meta actually mean? It's actually an acronym, and it stands for Most Effective Tactic Available. So there you go. When you hear someone say meta, or who's the meta, or what's the meta, or the meta's changing or shifting, it's because of the character's power level or usability for that particular game mode is the best. Some characters are meta in multiple game modes, so it can kind of vary. The next term I want to talk about is pretty straightforward, PvE. You'll hear this a lot. This is player versus environment. This is basically where you are playing against content in the game that is not owned by a player. What I mean by that is if you are fighting a world boss or if you're going through a story mode, this is different than if you're doing timeline battle, as an example. In timeline battle, you're actually fighting against somebody else's team, even though the computer is controlling it. It's still a player account that you're facing off against. So that term is PvP, or player versus player. So you have PvE and PvP. Those are the two different types of gameplay. Most of the content in Marvel Future Fight is considered PvE. The next one is some people, and I'll go ahead and pull this up. Some people will talk about the character equipment, and they'll say stuff like this term right here, and they'll spell out the letters ISO. This is actually a short word, and it's ISO. ISO 8 is short for isotope. And if you look up Marvel Isotope 8, it's actually used in a multitude of games out there. So it's not just Marvel Future Fight that it's used in. So ISO is short for isotope. CTP. Custom gear is what you can equip to your character, and there's different types, like there's obelisks, and most people use obelisks, but they also have a CTP. Now, CTP is short for Celestial Tech Pack, and there's a variety of different Celestial Tech Packs, and they have different levels based upon whether or not they are reforged. You can only reforge CTPs, you can't reforge obelisks. But basically what you're doing is you're taking a base standard CTP and you're reforging it to make it more powerful, and you can end up with one of two types. The first level up is what's called a mighty CTP, and the next level, which everyone tries to strive for, is a brilliant. There's a whole bunch of stuff I can talk about with CTPs, but I'm just letting you know there's three different levels. What people will sometimes do is they'll shorten the name and they'll use an acronym. So as an example, on my Doctor Strange here, I have a Brilliant Rage. So some people will call this a B Rage. An M Rage would be a Mighty Rage. And this applies to any CTP that's out there, like a Greed. This is an M Greed or a Mighty Greed. They're referring to a Celestial Tech Pack. And yes, there are additional stats on Mighties and Brilliants, and they can vary on how they are. But again, we'll cover that in different videos. The next one I want to talk about is procking. Procking is a term that's critical if you want to understand how to play Marvel Future Fight. I've got a video specifically dedicated to it. I can also make a future updated video if you want. But in essence, when you are playing the game, in the upper left corner, you will see little vest icons. They'll be either green or they'll be orange now. They try to separate them for support ones. Your main character's proc is going to be a green vest that slowly counts down. Not everything can proc. There are two different types of procs in the game. There is the one that's going to continue with any skills you use while it's active. And then there's the single skill proc, which means when you hit a skill, the proc will work unless you interrupt it. So if you go to another skill, you kind of lose that proc. So depending on what you're using, as an example of this, if you are familiar at all with the CTPs, Rage would be an example of a proc that is happening no matter what skills you use. Those are the ones that are very sought after by folks that are very spammy, where they're not like building up all their skills and then hitting with one powerful skill like Sharon Rogers. You might do like a 3-5-4, and then the 4 you want to proc and all the damage is on that 4. Where like Cable has that too with some of the chain hit stuff that he does, or at least some of the older uniforms with them. Whereas an Energy has a single proc, and you can tell that within the description, because when it does this proc stuff, you'll see like increases a percentage based upon dodge and crit rate. That's a lot different than if I was to go over here to, all right, here we go, Adam has one. So what he's going to do here is he's going to increase basic damage 200% for one skill. So just be aware of that. Obelisks are the same thing. They have these things. Some people call them mini rages or anger procs, which is going to be like a percentage, and it's any skills within inside that window while that proc is activated versus a single skill being amplified. Usually you want to do the 200, which is the max for an obelisk. You can get a little bit higher with some of the Reforged Celestial Tech Packs or CTPs. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that's what procking is referring to. The next one is debuff. Debuff has to do, now typically you'll see this on leadership skills. You do have some passive support characters that do what's called debuffing as well. And that'll be like Strife and Wasp, but a lot of them have it on their leadership. An example here is Surfer. If I go over here, you'll see removes all debuffs, and it does this every 12 seconds. This is critical for player versus player PvP. And basically what this is doing is when you are debuffing characters, you are making it easier to attack and destroy them. So by removing those debuffs, you increase your ability to survive. This is important for PvP. It's not used as often in PvE. It is going to have some effect, but it is critical in a PvP scenario. So when you say someone is a debuff or use a debuff leave, what they're referring to is removes all debuffs. That's the skill that they're referring to, and that's why it's important. The next one here is, of course, is leadership. Leadership is kind of tricky because there's different type of, like, if you get into info and details, people have different types of abilities here. One of them is leadership. That's not what we're typically referring to. We were referring to the leadership skill. There can only be one leader on a team. So your leader is the main character you equip first on your team. You'll use this in 3-person teams. You'll use this in like world boss type of stuff or in story mode. Now, if you're doing the big battle arena or other world battlers like 5, there's no leadership effect. But those that do have a leadership position, and there is one skill, and this only takes effect if they're in that leadership position. So this is very important when you're building your teams. You want to make sure that you're doing a character that's giving leadership that is going to help your team. Now, in some cases, the character who has the leadership is also doing the damage. In other cases, you'll have a better leader even if they have a leadership. As an example, Doctor Strange here, he does have a self-lead. So if you hear someone say they're a self-lead, that means that they can work with their own leadership and doubling up the supports. Some characters either have a crappy leadership or there's a better leadership out there, so you don't use their self-lead. You use a different lead with them and then a support character and have them be the main person. Support's the other one. Support is what they have. They have like, there's a whole bunch of different types of support skills. There's passive ones. A lot of them happen with the tier 2. When you get them to tier 2, they unlock a new passive. Sometimes it'll be their main passive, but everyone has 2 passives. So the tier 2 passives has this little Roman numeral number 2 icon. But if you go down here, there's also another passive. And then there's uniform passives as well. All of these accumulate, and then it gets even more confusing because you have artifact passives as well. And all of these kind of accumulate together for support. Let me grab a support character really quick, like M'Baku or someone who has a support artifact. Just to give you a visual representation of what I am talking about. Satana is another one. I'm trying to think of folks off the top of my head, and it might be easier if I look at the whole list. Having all the characters in the game sometimes can be trying, so please bear with me here as I quickly scroll through here, and I probably should have just popped his name in the top. So, M'Baku, he does have a leadership, but look, that's only 30%. There's characters who have better leadership, so he's not always used a lot in leadership. Instead, you have passive over here, then you have this passive. All allies. So by just being on the team, all allies are getting this benefit. That's what they're referring to as a support. Then his artifact on top of it also says all allies. So when you're talking about a support character, you're talking about someone who is just on the team that is helping all of the allies out just by being a member of the team. So positioning is very important when building your teams. The next one I'll talk about is your main character who's doing the main damage. Sometimes this is referred to as a DPS character. DPS stands for damage per second. It's a terminology that's typically used in MMORPGs and whatnot, but that's what they're referring to. Your DPS, your damage, your main character that's doing all the stuff. So you'll have a leadership role, your damage, your DPS role, and your support role. And in some cases, self-lead gets the double support. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit better when folks are giving you advice and using these terms. Moving right along, there's also OB, which stands for Odin's Blessing. Odin's Blessing is referring to gear that is equipped onto the character. So you can use what's called an Uru, and this, of course, is Marvel terms. So you can see this in other places as well. But if you go to their the gear, this individual has Odin's Blessings on everything. Odin's Blessing is a type of gear that can be equipped. So you have different type of Uru. You can only have up to 2, actually, yeah, you can only have up to 2 of the Uru, but only a single Odin Blessing. So that's something important to keep in mind. Each of the different Odin's Blessings have a different type of power, and they can be what's called awakened, which makes them more effective. There's also a like a really big awakening, which is more powerful. So like in this case, you can see I'm getting 183 energy attack twice just by having it, whereas this one here doesn't have that, so it's 145. Right? So you can see the difference there. There's a notable difference on the power spike. So you want to be careful with Odin's Blessings. They're rare, they're sought after, they're the best ones, but you also have your Uru as well. Your Uru cannot be amplified like this. So just be aware. So when they're talking about amplification, if they say, how many obes do you have on your character? They're talking about Odin's Blessings. And the best characters in the game that are used for stuff like different types of game modes like Alliance Battle that are competitive, they'll try to stack them with Odin's Blessings. This is one of the main reasons amongst all the other stuff within a build that makes the character super effective. So OB stands for Odin's Blessing. Game mode, AB. You'll hear a lot of people talk about AB like I just did. AB is a acronym that just stands for Alliance Battle. So if you go to Arena, top left corner here, Alliance Battle. There are 3 different types of Alliance Battle. People will usually use AB to refer to all of them. Nobody really talks about normal, because if you're competitive like me, you kind of walk through this content. Most of the AB players just walk through normal. We don't even talk about it because it doesn't matter who you use filler characters, fodder to just get rid of and move on. We'll talk about those in a second as well. Extreme, we refer to this as ABX. X is for extreme, so Alliance Battle Extreme, and ABL, which is Alliance Battle Legendary. These are the 3 different types of AB, but again, typically folks will talk about if they're an AB Alliance or an AB focused player, they're talking about Alliance Battle. Moving right along, we have WB and WBL, which stands for World Boss Legendary and World Boss. So you have your basic World Boss Ultimate characters, which anyone can fight against. Then you have your World Boss Legendaries. These are the elite ones. This is like endgame content where you'll need to have at least a tier 3 / a transcended character in order to face them. But there's also some that require tier 4 characters or you can't face them at all. So even though you can have anyone as a striker, you are restricted on who you can face the actual boss with. So when they're talking about World Boss, or if they're World Boss Effective or WB, WBL, they're talking about World Boss Legendary and World Boss Ultimate, respectively. Forging. So you have the ability to reforge CTPs. I kind of covered this, but if they're talking about have you reforged it, it'll be glowing. Brilliants are harder to get. When you do the reforging process, you need 2 CTPs that are exact same. So Shang-Chi here has a base rage. So if I wanted to reforge this, I would have to get another rage. And then there's this reforged in the bottom left corner, and then there's a success chance based upon when you're trying to reforge, how successful could this be? So you would hit reforge, you would pick what you're reforging with, you would select the material, and then there's a percentage increase on occasion for the success rate. Otherwise, it's super low. And yes, you have to use CTPs, and you would be burning all of these to try to get your percent chance success up, and it is low. So a lot of people do this because that's how you get the more powerful stuff. If you do it with 1 and nothing for a super success, you end up with a mighty period. If you can get the brilliance, the brilliance, they're so much more powerful. That's what you want. You want these brilliance. But anyway, that's reforging. So when they're talking about reforging, they're referring to that. When I said fodder and filler, fodder characters are characters that are used to just get through content. The prime example of this is Shadowlands. Shadowlands is where you're going to use the primary bulk of your characters. I have all characters in the game, all 275 characters. A lot of these is what we would refer to as fodder characters. They're not completely worthless. If you're pushing Shadowlands, they can help you get tokens for Shadowland tokens. So you fill up a full team, use your main folks to carry them through, and they're just kind of there to help fill spaces. Filler characters are characters that are just kind of filling a slot. When you are going up against like AB, if you don't have all the right characters, sometimes you'll throw in a filler character, or in World Boss Legendary, they're not adding anything to the team. They're not serving lead, support, or damage. Instead, they're just there because you need 3 characters to play. So a filler or fodder is just kind of thrown in there to fill the ranks. Moving on, there are 2 different types of characters as far as the path to tier 4. Not everyone can be tiered 4. Base characters are tier 1. You level them up, they get to tier 2. Tier 2 can split off to Transcended, or they can split off to tier 3. They're basically the same. The biggest difference is your Transcended characters is going to, like characters like this, they're going to have their 6, but it's going to be ready right away, and it's going to recharge even if you're doing nothing. If you swap to a different character, sometimes that recharge will continue to go on most game modes. Your tier 3s, you have to do skills to charge it up so it doesn't start out. So your tier 3 characters likewise have that 6. That's the big difference between them, but it's the same thing. It's just they separated them out to have a little bit variety in gameplay. Cap. When you talk about capping your stats, not everybody understands, like, well, what do you mean capping your stats? So your character stats under details, you'll have a huge list over here. Some of these skills are capped and some are not. Now, if you're a veteran player, if you've been playing a while, you realize some of these are yellow and you know those are capped. What does that mean? That means that stat cannot go beyond the cap, the highest it's allowed to go. If you show exceeded stats, you can see the red here is the wasted. That's your excess. So technically my attack speed is not 130%. That's where it caps, can't go beyond that. It's actually the 25.41 added to the 130, so technically it's like 155.41, but only 130 can hit because of the cap. So when you're adjusting your cards or your builds, or Uru or Odin's Blessings that are equipped, if you want to keep the certain stats capped, you want to make sure, like, oh, how much do I have to work with? So you see your exceeded stats. Other ones like energy and physical, the attack up there, can't cap. There is no cap. They can have infinite number, theoretically. So you always want to pile on as much as you can, which is why a lot of people try to stack that. So just be aware of that when they're talking about caps on their skills, they're talking about these specifically. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is crafted stats versus fixed stats on cards. So cards and swords can all be crafted. When it comes to cards, you have 2 different types of stats based upon the type of card it is. First and foremost, standard cards cannot be crafted. Only P cards, premium cards, can be crafted. And the number of fixed stats changes based upon how many stars there are. All premium start out as 6. Your base cards start out as 1. And if you look at any of these, you'll see a yellow stats below. A 1 will have a single yellow stat. That's a fixed stat. That will never change. If you continue to work on this and level it up, you can get to 2 and 3. You'll start getting more. You always want to get these up to 6. Not only does this add this to your collection, but it shows you how many you can have capped. There's 2 orange stats here. A base card has 2 fixed stats. Now, what does fixed mean? It means if you re-roll this card to get the quality better, is typically what you're aiming for. You can have a 1 to a 7. 7 will increase these fixed stats higher. They'll be based upon their quality level. The quality 1, lowest stats possible. Quality 7, highest stats possible, which I know is an 11%. So you can get those stats higher. The ones below that are random, and you can't really do anything to change those. So if I was like to go to the card info here, I can go to the question mark and select. It can randomly be one of those each time that you re-roll this during the crafting process. Then you have your P cards, which have 3 stats versus just the 2. This one right here, so if I go to the card info down here and I scroll to the bottom, these fixed options, there's 3. Only the first 2 are affected by quality. The third one is always going to be a 5.1% across all cards. You can slide through them. And then there's 3 random options instead of 4. Your crafted stats are these top ones. So when you are reforging and crafting, you can have 1 of 3 colors, and then you can also have a random stat. So something to keep in mind. So when you're going through your cards, just be aware when they're talking about crafted stats or fixed stats, that's what they're referring to, and be aware how the quality impacts. See, there's that 11%. Your crafted stats match those top 2. It's all 11%. And again, the 5.1 for the third. So when you're picking your cards, we can do a separate card video, but that's kind of like some of the high level terminology and acronyms that are used inside of Marvel Future Fight. Hopefully that'll help you if you are a newer player. and brand new, you might not have heard of some of these, or like you didn't understand what they meant because people mentioned them and they're like, well, what are they talking about? So hopefully this helps you to have a more thorough conversation, or at least understand advice that is given to you. I will say that Marvel Future Fight has one of the best communities in gaming that I've seen. The forums sometimes can be a little bit on the toxic side, but if you go on Twitch or YouTube or Discord, I'm on all three, or if you go on Reddit sometimes, you can actually have some pretty good conversations, and in the forums, you can still have solid conversations. So look for a strong community. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. A lot of players like myself want to help you. And if we're a star creator like I am, we want to help you. That's why we're doing this. Yes, it's nice to have the additional 5,000 crystals per month, but talking about a game that I'm passionate about and I've spent years playing, that's fun. That's enjoyable. So I like to share this information with you. So anyway, feel free to ask questions in the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to them. Maybe I'll make some video responses, whatever. I do stream on Twitch if you want to check me out there as well. So anyway, happy Marvel Future Fighting, and hopefully that was super helpful, and I will catch you in the next one.